Alex Ross designed me a cool suit of armor. Sadly, there are no adventures in my comics to show how cool it actually is.
Now available in paperback, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Pick up your copy of John Haynes at Death's Door at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere.
In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Tony Stark is considered to be the foundation of the MCU. And Iron Man is the most popular character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Unfortunately, that popularity that Tony Stark receives on screen has not translated to the comic shop, and your Iron Man comics have struggled for over 20 years. Now, your Iron Man comics, I believe, have struggled ever since the days when Len Kamenetsky left the book back in 1994. And once Len Kamenetsky left the book, it went into a serious state of decline where the character suffered a serious issue as related to its continuity with the horrible storyline known as The Crossing. Now, The Crossing basically derailed the Tony Stark character, and efforts were made to try to get the character back on track with the Hero's Return storyline, where your Tony Stark did come back for a solid run of comics by writer Kurt Busiek and artist Sean Chen, which are considered to be classics up there with the legendary run done by David Michelinie, John Romita Jr., and Bob Layton, and the Len Kamenetsky, Kevin Hopgood run, which introduced legendary characters like War Machine and the Hulkbuster armor. All of those runs are considered to be legendary, but we haven't really had a legendary Iron Man run since about 2001 when Kurt Busiek left the Iron Man book, and since then the character has been in a state of decline. While there was a period where people thought things were coming back with the character with the Warren Ellis Extremis storyline, the character never really got any traction, and the only way people got to see anything good related to Iron Man was in 2008's Iron Man movie. And sadly, the Iron Man character, even though he does well in the movies, struggles in the comics, and the character has gone through multiple reboots with writers like your Brian Michael Bendis and writers like your Christopher Cantwell, where they start out with promise but then wind up falling completely apart. Now, this is the latest reboot from your Marvel Comics to try to restart the Iron Man character, and sadly, it's just as bad as the previous run by Christopher Cantwright Well, where it started out with a fantastic first issue, but then wound up falling completely apart. Now, one of the things that frustrates me is that you had somebody like Alex Ross come out here and design a fantastic armor like the Model 70, but it seems like writers can't write a good story around this armor. Iron Man has a fantastic suit that looks absolutely great in visuals, but the problem is that Marvel's editorial just can't find a writer to go out here and tell a story about a confident Tony Stark who is out here building up Stark Enterprises while overcoming his enemies in his rogues gallery. No, what they do, instead of showing us how fantastic this Model 70 armor is and what cool things it can do, is they get into these meandering stories which try to show us how human Tony Stark is, but basically show us how pathetic he is as a person, and that doesn't give us anything that makes him relatable to us. That was one of the things that irritated me about the previous run of Iron Man done by your Christopher Cantwright Well, which basically fell just apart, just like his independent comic Blue Flame, which basically flamed out after 9 issues with a whole bunch of meandering storylines that went nowhere. And your Gerry Duggan is picking up on those meandering storylines, and we go from a beta male Iron Man to an omega male Iron Man. And this book takes Tony Stark from being a soft, emasculated man to becoming a completely pathetic omega male. Now, this issue starts out with an expository sequence which tells us about the past of Tony Stark in a very weak and meandering way. And when I see comics opening up with multiple panels on the first page, that's a major problem because you're supposed to start out with a splash. A splash introduces us to the character, shows us what they want and why we should care, and we get an expository sequence with your Gerry Duggan telling us about Tony Stark. We already know his origin story. Show me why I should care about Tony Stark. And we see Tony Stark and all of his problems, and that's not a selling point for a comic. When you're doing a comic, it's an escape, and I don't want to see problems because I've already got problems, and I can watch problems on the news on 6 o'clock for free. But here we have your Tony Stark looking sad at going from being confident to further going into becoming pathetic, and we have him reminiscing about his homes, reminiscing about his business, and then getting into the last part of the Iron Man run where Tony Stark gives away most of his fortune trying to buy supervillain paraphernalia like the Mandarin's rings and gives it over to Riri Williams and then goes back and to the world to just basically exist. And again, he's going back to his little home up in gentrified Harlem, and all he's got is his Model 70 because he's got no money. He's got some sort of arc reactor or something, and there's a flaw going on with it, and his whole house winds up blowing up. And as this book goes on, we've got Tony Stark looking all beat up and looking sad. And again, this is not a good look for a superhero. Superheroes are supposed to be confident, but what they do with Tony Stark, that really a lot of writers do these days, they call themselves trying to tear down Tony Stark to bring him back up. And what they don't understand is that the deconstructive model, that was an 80s thing, and when it was done in the 80s, you had Rhodey as the subplot and the primary focus to move things along to sell the superhero, and you had Tony Stark struggles with alcohol. Yes, we've done this before, and it's just getting really long in the tooth because people are tired of seeing a weak Tony Stark. We've seen this done for the last 20 years, and we see this Tony Stark, he's struggling after this explosion. Somebody got hurt, he's trying to settle things, and again, he just gives in because Jen is trying to tell him, you should fight back, you should push back, and your Tony Stark going from a beta male in the Can't Write Well run, he's now an omega male, and this omega male has basically given up as related to everything, and as he's given up to everything, he's living in a warehouse that he's got in New Jersey, and he's gone from being a sad beta male in the previous Iron Man run to becoming a pathetic male in the first issue of Gerry Duggan's run. And again, this is not a good look, and this just shows how they're just pushing their identity politics as related to their anger at rich people. And I look at this whole issue, and again, it's just absolutely sad. This is not the Tony Stark I would write if I were writing Tony Stark. No, the Tony Stark I would write would be similar to the way I write John Haynes. He would have some confidence. He would go out here and be looking strong, and he would be out here in some James Bond style adventures, and we would be seeing all sorts of cool features from his armor and all sorts of cool innovations that he's making, because that's one of the hooks as related to Iron Man. You want to see an incredibly handsome rich guy having a cool suit of armor that he takes the bad guys on, and you get to see him going out here and getting the attention of hot, sexy women. That's what Iron Man and Tony Stark have always been about since Stan Lee created him. But no, Marvel wants to give us a low-T, soy-filled Omega male Iron Man with no backbone, no stones, living in a warehouse looking extremely pathetic and just looking really sad, and coming out of a warehouse that's not Tony Stark. No, coming out of Stark Enterprises and being their flagship mascot and superhero. That's what Tony Stark is about. And again, it's really embarrassing because Alex Ross designed a fantastic suit with this Model 70, this what I call retro mod armor, and this retro mod armor, which pays homage to the classic 1970s Iron Man and also updates it for the 21st century and makes it similar to the MCU movies while paying homage to the classic. This suit has been done dirty by bad editorial and bad writers who impose their identity politics onto Tony Stark and take out all of their anger at rich people by making Tony Stark their whipping boy. And this whole book just, again, it's not the Invincible Iron Man I know. No, this is the pathetic Iron Man. And this pathetic Iron Man is in a pathetic story that basically doesn't show us that Tony is a hero with any sort of confidence or any sort of self-worth. I mean, we get a pathetic man, and again, we got a pathetic dude out here sitting up eating Chinese food in the ruins of his own building. That's not Tony Stark. No, Tony Stark is in a restaurant with some hot chicks, and he's having a meal at a Michelin star restaurant as he's finding out information on who set him up. That is who Tony Stark is, not this pathetic soy-filled loser, because this pathetic soy-filled loser, I mean, this isn't a hero. This is a sad, sad man. And again, they're trying to call themselves humanizing Tony Stark, but I don't go to comics to see a guy looking all sad and down on his luck. If I want to see a guy who's sad and down on his luck, I'll go out here and walk down the streets of the South Bronx, and I wouldn't be spending money, and I didn't really spend any money on this comic, but it's just absolute garbage. And again, Marvel, they just can't seem to give us a good Iron Man, and that's the sad part, is that this Tony Stark is the character who laid the foundation for the MCU, but they seem to want to demolish this character in their comics. And again, it's sad because Iron Man was one of my favorite characters, and I bought many of the books when I was in high school. I bought the Armor Wars, and I bought practically every book in the second Michelini-Layton run at newsstands and at comic shops. And I have many of the original Michelini-Layton run books from my brother's collection, in my collection. And I love those books, and I practically just keep them in a safe space, because those books were a major part of my childhood, because Tony Stark was one of my favorite characters, and I hate to see him done dirty like this by Marvel Comics. I mean, I look at Alex Ross's design. Again, it's just a beautiful design of armor. The second suit he has designed is from the Busiek Chen armor, which is called the Renaissance armor, and it doesn't. At least the Busiek Chen armor got some good stories, but the Model 70 has never gotten a good story. And that's what really disappoints me, because this armor looks fantastic and it deserves to have some stories that are worth reading, that can be a part of its lore. And again, they just haven't found that writer with that passion and that love for Tony Stark to give us the character that was so much fun in the first Iron Man movie in 2008. I mean, I want to see Tony Stark going back to being the playboy by day and the crime fighter who cares about people. I want to see all of the elements that make Tony Stark great on screen and great in the previous runs, like David Michelini and Bob Layton and John Romita Jr., Mark Bright, all those legendary creators. I want to see that character go back to actualizing his potential, because I believe that there's still lots of good Iron Man stories to tell, but you can't tell that by the incompetent writers they have been hiring on the Iron Man character for the last 20 plus years. And over the last 20 going on 30 years, it's a shame we haven't had a truly great Iron Man run, because it's been way too long since people have had a really good Iron Man run. I mean, I thought about it a while back. I said the last time we really had a good run was the Kaminsky Hopgood run, the Busiek Chen run, and if you really want to go there, the Extremis run. But after that, we haven't had a run that really makes you say, hey, I want to go pick up an Iron Man book and really define the character. We really haven't had that type of storytelling in years, and it's a shame, because again, Alex Ross really put his heart into that Model 70 design, and instead of giving us an invincible Iron Man that shows how powerful he is, we get a pathetic Iron Man who is an Omega male who basically shows us all of the aspects and dysfunctional behavior that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. That's why I say you should call it the pathetic Iron Man, because all we're getting is not a superhero who overcomes his odds. No, all we're getting is a man in crisis whose life is on the brink of self-destruction. Now, if you want to pick up my first comic, Easting, No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle for 99 cents. And if you want to pick up the John Haynes series and all of the stories in the John Haynes series and my other books in the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series and the E-Steam series, and my other books like Eternal Night and the Thetas, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and Walmart. And if you want to see me do more comic review videos and have the money to be able to buy great independent comics that I buy from places like Concrete Comics and many other independent comic creators, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, Easting Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new Easting series adventure. Get Easting Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today.